What's up, Narcolepsy Click? You already know what it is. Your boy Narcolepsy Boy 94, aka Malik, back here again doing another podcast with a special guest today. I'll let him introduce himself. Some people may already know who he is, but I'll let him introduce himself. If you want to plug in all your stuff too, man, your social medias and all that stuff too. But we have Mr.
Ryan Satin from WWE on Fox Sports. I guess for social media, mainly just me at Ryan Satin and WWE on Fox on all social media platforms, including YouTube.
I apologize for some of the people. I see some of the people here in the comment section. Some people have been here waiting. We're like 40 minutes behind, but we've been talking off the air about, things. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this interview, though, man. It means a lot.
Of course.
For you to we've been talking for a little bit on TikTok, but, for you to agree to do this, man, it means a lot to me. So thanks, man, for the.
Of course, man.
For the interview. Appreciate people being in the
like I was saying before when we were talking in the before I respect all your hustle on TikTok. I'm a fan of all your TikTok videos, and I really do appreciate everything you do on there. I like the positive spin you have on stuff, and hustle respects hustle. So I can see you always grinding on there. So when you asked me to do this, I was definitely down to help you out.
Ryan Satin put me over on the Narcolepsy Boy channel. No, I'm just kidding. Appreciate it, man. Thank you. So I got a bunch of questions here that I want to ask. We'll just kind of run through these common questions if you want to. So I'm sure some of these questions you may have been asked a lot, but first one I want to ask you is, how did you get into wrestling? So going back to your childhood, what's your first memory? Do you remember like how you first fell in love with it? Was somebody who got you into it?
Well, it was a couple different things, mainly though, like the thing that made me a diehard wrestling fan, because I always appreciated wrestling. My dad was a wrestling fan my whole life. He worked on a show that was on USA Network back in the day called Rhonda Shear Up All Night. And they used to do stuff with
really familiar, by the way.
Yeah, Rhonda Shear did stuff with WWF back in like the 90s. Okay. And so I got to go to a show when I was very young. And that would kind of like always just made me respect it. Just from some of the stuff I saw there, it was like, and this will, probably explain why I like the behind the scenes of wrestling so much and why I've always been so fascinated in it, was that, I went there once because my dad was producing this pre-show thing. And I got to be in the gorilla position where Luna and Bam Bam Bigelow happened to be standing. They were about to go out to the ring, and they were just so nice. And they talked to me, normal people. How are you doing? Are you enjoying the show? Yeah. Then their music hits and they, okay, nice to meet you. They kick the door in and it's like, bleh, and they're like going all crazy and doing their thing. And it was awesome. And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And then, I get shuffled backstage to a different part where I had to walk through the locker room. And I remember I see Yokozuna and Undertaker playing cards together. And this is like when they're feuding. And I'm like, wait, I just saw those guys
beat each other up in the ring.
Yeah. I just saw them beefing, and like, Yokozuna's sitting there in like a thong, and Undertaker's just chilling. They're playing cards, and then I remember like the Men on a Mission were standing there and they saw me and they kind of like, they went into character because they realized they were kids in the locker room and kind of like at us. And I just remember thinking like, this is crazy, like this is so interesting. And then, a few years later, because it's not like I watched it religiously. I appreciated it then. I was like, this is a cool world. And I would always kind of like sometimes watch it with my dad and stuff like that. But the thing that like made me a lifetime fan was Mick Foley being thrown off the Hell in a Cell. Like, because before that, it was always like, oh, that's not real. It's not real. But when Mick Foley did that, it was like someone said, you got to watch this, because I'd seen the backstage when I was a kid. I knew Yokozuna and Undertaker, they were playing cards together. Like, this isn't, this isn't like what I knew from an early age, like the mystery was taken away from me,
Right.
But then when I saw Mick Foley get thrown off the Hell in a Cell, it was like, well, you can't fake that. Like that hurts. Like that's crazy, And so I remember my neighbor being like, hey, you guys got to watch this. Me and my brother, you guys got to watch this. And we went, okay. We came over to his house and we watched the match. It was like right after it aired, like the next day. And we were just like mesmerized by the whole thing. It was like, well, this is real. Like they tried to kill this man on pay-per-view. Like, we got to see what happens next, And so then we started watching just kind of like religiously after that. The Attitude Era hooked us in, and those were really like the two moments, that really hooked me in as a fan. And yeah.
I seen a interview. I don't know, you probably seen it, but I seen the interview on the Broken Skull sessions when Stone Cold was interviewing him, and he said that the second one hurt more than the first bump. So when he got chokeslammed through the cage, that was like that to me was always the crazier bump. People always talk about getting thrown off the cell and everything, which was crazy, but like when he got chokeslammed through the cell and hit the ring, I was like, he's got to be dead or something. Like that's insane. There's no way you can't tell me that hurt. People will look at that, and I did a video on TikTok a while ago. It was like, when people say wrestling is fake, and then I put up like wrestling moments that are real, and people are like, oh, the ring has probably got like some type of padding, and I'm like, yeah, it has padding, but he's falling like literally from like 10 feet or something like that. Like he's literally getting chokeslammed through the cage onto the ring, bro. Like, and the ring is not soft either by any means. So like the fact that the second bump was always crazy to me, bro. I was like, that's. When I first, and I didn't watch it live, but like I saw the DVD and everything, and when I saw
the whole match is crazy. Like honestly, it's the whole. Whenever someone goes, I've never watched wrestling, show me a match that's gonna make me like it or make me find it interesting. I always put that one on because I don't care who you are, you can't watch that match and not be blown away by just what you're watching. Of just like, oh my god, like what's happening?
That's when I knew. Crazy. That's the first time I knew wrestlers were just different because not only did Mick Foley get thrown off the cage, chokeslammed through the cage, got a tooth through his nose, but he came back later that night for the main event during the Kane and Stone Cold match. So he came back out later that night after he was just literally like brutalized in the ring. I'm like, yo, like he could have easily been like, you know what, I'm not going out there. Forget that. He still went out there.
Well, for me, on top of that, you say like that match is when you really learned like something about wrestlers, and how much they can go through. But like, to me, not only was there that, but then I don't know how long, I don't know. I want to say like Beyond the Mat came out in 99 or 99. But okay, so it came out in 99, right? But in 98, so my dad works in the entertainment industry. He is like a producer for TV and stuff like that. And so out here in Hollywood, sometimes they'll have movie screenings where like the directors are trying to figure out which parts they should take out, which parts are the best. And so they'll have early screenings like way in advance just to get a vibe of what fans think, right? And so my dad saw that there was this documentary about wrestling that was going to be screening. And so he took a young Ryan to go see Beyond the Mat way before anyone knew what Beyond the Mat was, had ever heard of Beyond the Mat. It was probably 6 months before it came out, something like that. And, when I saw like Mick Foley, like do that, which had already blown my mind, but then you see like the person behind Mick Foley and you see his family there for when he's getting hit with the chair. And I was at the match where he was getting hit with the chair. And so like just all of it together was like learning what I had seen that first experience when I was backstage at WWE was just that the people behind the characters are so fascinating, that like the mentality that it's, the different reasons that people get into this, what their goals are, what they go through, like all of that stuff just blew my mind. I was like, man, like this industry is so interesting. And so all of those things just hooked me more than anything. Of like, I was really hooked on the behind the scenes factor from a young age, because the internet was kind of new when I was a kid, and it was like, oh, we can find out about these things about the people on the internet. I was real OG on the internet. So yeah, the behind the scenes factor always kind of really hooked me. As much as I love wrestling, like, don't get me wrong, like I love the matches itself, like Stone Cold, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, Mick Foley, Hardy Boys during that time period, at least, Daniel Bryan now, stuff like that, AJ Styles. But really, like, the behind the scenes really hooked me from a young age, because it was just like this guarded world that was unlike any other entertainment medium.
I've always been the exact same way, because I've always been fascinated with the behind the scenes stuff. Like, I watch all the documentaries when they do like the 24s and just all the behind the scenes stuff when they show people behind the scenes and getting ready for the, like, I've always been fascinated by that stuff. Like, I know it's like kayfabe and everything, but I'm like, I always wanted to know, like, one of my dreams is like to be able to go to a backstage wrestling show and just to see the process of the entire show when everything goes on, because like it was always just so fascinating to me to when they talked about, after WrestleMania 30, during WrestleMania 30, when Undertaker left the match after Brock Lesnar, Vince McMahon left WrestleMania to go to the hospital with the Undertaker. He wasn't even there for the main event. Like, that's crazy. Like, you hear all these stories, like, man, like, you hear all these stories and they blow your mind, bro. Like, so many unique, cool stories that I've always been fascinated by with the behind the scenes stuff. I wish they would make like a DVD or like something like a big documentary, just like with behind the scenes stuff, just straight behind, nothing else but behind the scenes, like from old footage to newer footage and everything. They got a bunch of footage from everywhere, man. Like,
oh yeah,
I've always been fascinated by stuff like that. So I'm
I love all that behind the scenes footage. I'm all about it too. That's like my favorite kind of stuff. Like I really dig all of that. So I'm the same exact way.
All right, question I want to ask right here: who was your favorite wrestler as a kid? So as a kid, we all had wrestlers that we looked up to or that we idolized. Who was the one for you?
Well, it was it was probably like, it was a mix. So it'd be Mick Foley, because I really liked he hooked me just because it was like he was crazy. Yeah. He was doing all his crazy stuff. He had multiple characters. Like, he was just working on a different level. And so
who's definitely your Mick Foley character? By the way, I got the Mick Foley shirt on right here too. I don't know if you can see it.
Perfect. There we go. I would say, probably Mankind, like
the beginning. Yes.
No. I was going to say the older Mankind. I think when he had the like car crash music, the da-na-na.
Yeah, my favorite version of Foley was the older, the original Mankind.
Yeah.
Came out with the brown, and he was feuding with the Undertaker in the Boiler Room Brawl, and he was like, rocking back and forth. That's my favorite Mick Foley ever, bro.
But I'm like 10 years older than you, and like I was living it when Mick Foley won the title, when all that happened, when when the tide turned, all that kind of stuff. I was watching Raw in it, cheering for Mick Foley. So
I wasn't for Mick Foley. I wasn't watching. I was only 2 when Mick Foley won the title, so I wasn't.
I was fully watching Raw that night, like Mankind fan, and so I liked all the stuff that he would do with Vince McMahon and The Rock and stuff. So definitely that
entertaining. He was more entertaining as that version. I'm big into like the dark characters though, so I like the really dark, mysterious Mankind when he used to pull his hair out and everything, and he was just really weird. I'm like, yo, this guy is crazy. Like, this is before, like, obviously I was watching the DVD, so like I would see like one of my favorite promos ever is a sit down interview he did with JR when he's talking about his childhood, and it's reflecting on everything Mick Foley, and he's like he's got patches in his hair that are missing everything, and he's like, he's cutting this promo with his voice, and he's talking about these deep thoughts and everything. I'm like, yo, I was really invested in that Mankind. I don't know why, but something about that.
Yeah, but this is your life. I feel like if you didn't live This Is Your Life, you maybe like only see it in retrospect. It wasn't the same. Like, it was crazy.
Never the same.
No, like, it was crazy when This Is Your Life was happening. It was like, man, this is such a long
my uncle
segment of talking.
My uncle's the one who got me into wrestling. He's always telling me that because he watched one of my favorite, honestly, some people don't like this match, but one of my favorite matches to go back and watch from WrestleMania was Hogan versus Warrior. And he lived it though. He just graduated high school at that time. So I wasn't around then, but he lived it. He was like, you watch it, but you weren't there. You know what I'm saying? Like, he wasn't like in the moment. Households were divided that day, bro. Like, you didn't know who to root for. You didn't know who was gonna win. Like, people were like, everybody was talking about this, bro. Like, you didn't get to experience that moment. So like, I can understand because I think there were
similar to that. My other two actually fall in line with that same thought process. One is Stone Cold, because
I didn't get to live through the Stone Cold era. That's one of the things I really wish I could have got to see.
Because like during that time period, it was like I was a Stone Cold guy, my brother was a Rock guy, and we would just argue all the time. Like, he was like Mr. Brahma Bull, I was Mr. Rattlesnake, and we would just always argue about it. Like, to this day, when I did a TikTok video on my favorite wrestlers, my mom texted me, and she was like, why didn't you include The Rock? And I was like, because The Rock was Drew's favorite wrestler. Like, Stone Cold was my guy, like that goes forever. And so similarly, like the Hardy Boys was probably my third option of like, Mick Foley, Stone Cold, and the Hardy Boys were like the thing that I was Team Extreme, because I include Lita in that as well. Yeah. And today, a friend of mine, he's a huge Edge and Christian fan. And I was a huge Hardy Boys fan, and I feel like those things never go away, because when that list came, and we argue about it all the time, and like he's always like, no, Edge and Christian's better. I'm always like, no, Hardy Boys are better. And then the finale came out of the greatest tag teams that WWE put out, and they put the Hardy Boys above Edge and Christian. And I was like, told you, dude, like Team Extreme for life, and he was like, no, they made a mistake, and we were arguing about it all day today. So
yeah, a lot of people, if you lived through those eras, man, I mean, there were always at one point wrestlers that were dividing people. Some people loved Hogan, but then there was Ultimate Warrior. Some people were Ultimate Warrior people. Then some people loved Bret Hart, but Shawn Michaels was there too, so people loved Shawn Michaels. It was divided. Rock and Austin. I'm saying, like, those were always the ones that I felt divided people, because I grew up in the Ruthless Aggression era. So that's when I started watching wrestling. So there wasn't really anybody divided around. Like, most people love John Cena. Like, John Cena, my favorite wrestler of all time, but you either like John Cena or you didn't like John Cena. So you were either Team Cena or Team Cena sucks. It wasn't in between. You were either one or the other. There wasn't anybody competing with John Cena. Maybe Batista for a period of time, for like maybe
an Edge, maybe
an Edge as a heel, maybe like you could throw maybe like Taker or something. Maybe even Jeff Hardy too. Jeff Hardy got pretty over at one point, but it was the same.
But it was pretty. It was Cena.
It was all pretty much Cena until the first time I really started to see the divide is when CM Punk came to the rise. After he cut that pipe bomb promo and those white shirts started to sell, that's when I from like 2005 up to like 2011, I rooted for John Cena. I didn't care. John Cena's any match, I'm rooting for John Cena. He's my guy. I don't care who he's fighting. Taker, he could fight Batista and Undertaker handicap match. I'm rooting for John Cena, right? But after that pipe bomb promo, I was like, yo, I was starting to get a little older then. I was like 14 at the time. So I was like, yo, like, everything he's pretty much saying it's kind of true. Like, he's not really lying, but like, is he allowed to say that? And then like that match against CM Punk, that was like legitimately the first time I rooted against John Cena. I was like, I want CM Punk to win the title this night. Like, I don't want John Cena to walk out with the title. Like, and I never thought I was gonna get to that point. Like, in my life, I was like, I really don't want John Cena to win. If he kind of wins, I'm gonna be upset. Actually, like, I want CM Punk to win this match. And like, that's
classic. Oh, classic, dude. And I agree. Like, I actually think that moment kind of like is when a big change in WWE happened, where like there's this big divide kind of started, where fans started to kind of like rebel against what the establishment wanted to a certain degree, and it kind of like amplified that voice and it hasn't really died down.
I feel like he was saying things that fans have felt for quite some time. You know what I mean? Because like this is 2011, so things are more not kayfabe anymore. So people know behind the scenes stuff. They know kind of how things are now. So like, what he was saying is kind of like true. Like, there were a lot of fans that are tired of John Cena now. Like, he's boogie it. John Cena's the guy, but he's always on top. Like, we want somebody else at that spot. So like, they were kind of in. Those were the fans that were like, yeah, CM Punk. Like, he's our guy. Like, we finally have a guy. That can be one of us. You know what I mean? But of course, WWE, they didn't see it that way. That's unfortunate. But
yeah, I knew you were a Ruthless Aggression kid, because one time you made a video about the Ruthless Aggression era being the best era, and I was like, someone didn't grow up in the Attitude Era.
No, I think I made a video. This is what I always say. Like, the Attitude Era is by far the most popular era, but like, I think the Ruthless Aggression era had better wrestlers when it comes to in-ring stuff.
No, I know, but my argument was still pretty sound, when I said
like, there's never
at the end of the day, the Attitude Era made more money and was more popular in the cultural zeitgeist.
I mean, I think Raw had a 8.1 rating at one point for the Attitude Era.
Yeah, but just TV is different. Like, I mean, you can't. It's like comparing like a box office from 1950 to 1990. It's like box office is so different. Like TV in 1990 was so different, and 1997 is so different than it is now.
Yeah, that's what I always tell people. It's so different. People consistently, all the time, I get it all the time in my videos. People, when I talk about era, they say, "Well, they need to bring back the Attitude Era." I'm like, they can never bring it back, guys. You have to understand, pop culture is so different now than it was. The world is different now than it was back then. You could have girls come on TV and strip, and you could have the Godfather come out and they can call them hoes on TV without people feeling like that's disrespectful or feeling some type of way about it. You can have Val Venus play a male porn star. You feel me? Like, you can do that back then, but like, none of those things can work today. You can never have a wrestler come out like Sable and have hands painted on her breast. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's so many things that would get so much backlash, and sometimes it's the little things too. Like, half the stuff DX did, you can't do that. You can't do that on TV nowadays. No, you can't do anything Godfather did. You can't do anything Val Venus did.
But I will say, I think the one thing from the Attitude that I would like to see them take from you can take from the Attitude Era is, I feel like during the Attitude Era, they did a much better job of making sure that every single segment kind of like helped highlight someone better. Like there wasn't just a handful of people being highlighted. There was like all these people being highlighted. And it wasn't just like, hey, we can only make certain people look good. It was like, we're going to make everyone look as good as possible at all times. And I felt like every segment was much more maximized back then in terms of like getting characters over as opposed to like, I don't know, there was this, I mean, there was still comedy, but it was like,
everybody in the Attitude Era was over. They all had a spot.
Yeah, I mean, everyone was getting over, and I feel like if everyone's not getting over to a certain degree, where like it's
everybody did something. Stone Cold and The Rock, Triple H, Val Venus, Godfather. Sable at one point, all she did would come out and pose on a chair, and she would get the biggest reaction of the night. She was over. Like everybody was over at one point. That's the one thing I will say about the Attitude and the Ruthless Aggression era that they had in common is that those two eras really focus on building stars for the future.
Yeah,
look how many stars and legends come from that era. So many Attitude Era, so many legends.
Yes.
Stone Cold, The Rock, many Attitude Era. John Cena, Batista, Randy Orton, Edge. You know what I'm saying? So many people who they focus on building for the future. That's why that's one thing I really want to see happen in wrestling today. Is like, you know, that's one thing that I feel about Roman Reigns right now. Roman Reigns is obviously the top guy, but like, there's no competition for him right now. Like there's nobody on SmackDown that I can look at and say like, you know what? I think he could beat him for the title because I don't really look.
I agree. I completely agree with you. But what I will say though is I do feel like Roman did do a good job of elevating every single one of his opponents.
Yes,
like
he did.
as much as like, you know, he might not have lost to them or anything like that. I do think that he helped elevate Kevin Owens to where he felt like he was a big deal again. Mm-hmm. He helped elevate Cesaro. Who?
Jey Uso, his cousin.
Yep. Jey Uso, like he really, like the past year, I feel like has helped, you know, rise the tide, you know, like bring everything up with him, just kind of like he says, you know, like like he says on TV about himself. So like, I do feel like that, but I completely agree with you in the fact that, and I've said it in a few of my articles, that one thing they're lacking right now is that one person that, you know, Roman Reigns at the top right now. And I feel like we don't have that one person right now who is being built up to be the guy to eventually beat him. Like right now, I don't see that out there. Like, I think he's helped bring people up, but there also needs to be another person who's like on the steady incline to where when he eventually meets up against Roman Reigns, everyone goes, that guy actually could beat Roman Reigns. Because I agree with you. That's the thing, is like no one on the show feels like they could believably beat Roman Reigns right now.
I do feel like they lack in star power because I feel like this era, they rely so much on part-timers like Goldberg and Lesnar and Cena and Rock or whoever come back and bring in their star value. But it's cool, but these guys aren't going to be around forever. So when these guys are not there,
SmackDown's done a pretty good job of not relying on the part-timers for the most part. Like, you know, that Roman, Kevin Owens, Cesaro, Seth.
But then you have Raw. I mean, look at Raw. I mean, you had Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre was in the WWE Championship picture every time, every match from WrestleMania 36 until Hell in a Cell last year. That's over a year and a half at that point.
Yeah, so, he said on Raw Talk, I think he said 18 months.
So and that's why people are so tired of him. Like, dude, like, okay, we get Drew can be a top guy. He can be a champion. That's fine. But, like, they have to be in every championship match. That's another reason why people hated John Cena for so much, because John Cena was always in the title picture. Like, okay, we get John Cena is the guy, but, like, can you do a storyline that doesn't involve him with the title? Something like, can we do something that doesn't involve the title for a little bit? Then go back to the championship when you can. But, like, he doesn't always need the title. And I feel like when you look at those eras, you always had other people to fill that spot if you really wanted to. Okay, John Cena, because you had Batista, you had Edge, you had Randy Orton, you had The Undertaker, you had Triple H, you had Shawn Michaels, Jeff Hardy, Chris Jericho. So many names you can name that could fill that spot to be the champion in that top level. But right now, I don't see that. Okay, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, I would throw in there, but Seth Rollins has been champion for a while. Drew McIntyre, yeah. Bobby Lashley's having a pretty good solid run right now as champion. But everybody else is kind of like everybody's talking about Big E, but I'm like, are they really going to push Big E? I don't really know. I can't. It's hard to tell. I mean, when you look at
he's the one on SmackDown who has the chance of being that person that I'm talking about. I feel like, to me,
I said
the smart move is having Big E win Money in the Bank. That's the thing that I think they could do to help get Big E. Just give him something to do. You know, without the Intercontinental title, he's had less to do, and I feel like having Money in the Bank is like a way to like condition the audience ahead of time into knowing that you're a future main eventer. And so I feel like if Big E has it, it elevates him to a certain degree, and it will give him something to do on SmackDown for the next year. Now, my fantasy booking doesn't involve him cashing in on Roman Reigns, though. I want to see, because we all know Brock's going to come back eventually. Like, this isn't, I don't have any inside info, but like in my mind, I'm assuming at some point in the next year, we may see Brock Lesnar return. Like, I don't know that. This isn't a scoop.
This is not a spoiler, by the way, people.
Yeah. This is me guessing, hoping. This is me hoping more than anything because I'm a Brock Lesnar fan.
I am too.
Yeah, it's like I assume he's going to come back at some point in the next year, right? So if Big E has Money in the Bank, right? What I want to see is I want to see Big E win Money in the Bank. I want to see Brock Lesnar come back at some point in the next year and beat Bobby Lashley for the title, whether it's a first or second match, I don't know. But at some point, beat Bobby Lashley for the title, and then New Day come out with chairs, whatever, kendo sticks, and they just go ham on Brock Lesnar right after one of his matches, demolish him with chairs, and finally get the payback for Kofi Kingston from the premiere of SmackDown. And Big E comes running out with his Money in the Bank. He cashes in and he beats Brock Lesnar for the WWE Championship.
That would be a big pop. And
everyone on Twitter, when I said this, they were like, "Were you going to turn New Day heel? How would that turn New Day heel? Everybody is Brock Lesnar's like the ultimate heel who has he beat all three of them at once. He beat in Japan. He beat Kofi in seconds on SmackDown during the SmackDown premiere.
That was awful.
So full circle, you don't think the fans would be so pumped to see Big E get the revenge for Kofi with Money in the Bank?
Another thing too is I said this. I don't know if you've seen this video I made on TikTok, but I'm a Brock Lesnar fan like you are. But I've seen a bunch of people, were always saying like, we want Brock to come back. But I made a video about it. I was like, do you guys really want Brock to come back? Because I don't think you guys do. I really don't think people want him to come back like that, because when he's there, people beg for him to leave. But when he's not there, you're like, oh, we want Brock Lesnar back now. Oh, do you really want Brock to come? You don't think you want him to come back because, number one, when he comes back, he's not going to wrestle as much. And he's probably going to win the world title and barely defend it. And when he has that title, you're going to be like, oh, he's holding the title hostage again. Like, oh, my God, like, I can't believe WWE is doing this again. I don't think people really want Brock Lesnar to come back. I think they like the ideas of Brock versus Bobby, of Brock versus some other people. But number one, Brock Lesnar, he puts people over, but it has to make sense for Brock Lesnar. So is Brock Lesnar going to put Bobby Lashley over? The last time we saw him, he laid down for Drew McIntyre. So, like, is he going to come back and lose again? I don't know. I don't see it happening personally. I don't know.
You sound like my dad when I pitched this idea to my dad. He was like, "You think Brock's coming back to lose to Big E, Ryan, and beat Bobby Lashley and lose to Big E?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can see it happening, Dad." And he was like, "No way." And same with one of my coworkers. He was like, "Ryan, you're crazy. That's not happening." He was like, "You want to bet money on it?" I was like, "Yeah, I do want to bet money on it." So we bet money on it. Well, we bet money on Big E winning Money in the Bank.
I want Big E to win Money in the Bank, but it's funny because I was on live stream with Axel and all them watching it, and I told them before this even happened, I was like, you know what they're going to do? They're going to have Drew McIntyre lose, and they're going to have him win Money in the Bank just because WWE really wants him to be champion again, but they know fans don't want him to be Bobby. So you know what, WWE, they're like, you know what, we'll give you what you want. We'll have Bobby Lashley be the champion. We're still going to do what the fuck we want at the end of the day. And Drew McIntyre is going to be champion again.
It's definitely a possibility. Like once he won the match on Raw, I was like, well, this is definitely a possibility.
Because I've had heard rumor. I don't know how true these rumors are, but I have heard like things out there that maybe like when there's going to be a draft and they may move Drew to SmackDown. So like if he moves to SmackDown, I could see him taking the title from Roman. I mean, they need somebody. So. Excuse me, I could see that happening, but I had a bunch of questions in here, man. We're not even going to get to. Fuck it. But
I still got some more time. It's all good, man.
Well, one of the questions I really wanted to know about it is this one right here. What was the process of working with TMZ? So for people who don't know, some people may not know this, but you used to work for TMZ before you used to work with Fox. What was the process of working with TMZ, and what was that like, that experience for you personally?
Well, I worked at TMZ for 7 years. I started as a PA, which for those of you who don't know is a production assistant. That's like the bottom. And, I had been a producer elsewhere, but I wanted an opportunity at a more established show. So I became a PA there and eventually, pushed enough to get on the news desk. And I was on the show. At first, I was like off and on the show every once in a while. But once I got on the news desk and started covering wrestling and being like the wrestling news guy, then I kind of like moved up. So by the end of my time at TMZ, I started as a PA and I ended as a senior producer who was running the website on weekends. So the website was pretty much under my direction Saturday and Sunday. I was kind of steering the ship. What was the process
of getting to that level? Did it take like a lot of?
It was wrestling. It was a lot of the wrestling stuff, but it was everything else too. I really, when I got there, it was really like, we just want you to find interesting content. Like, we just want you to find interesting stories. A lot of people think of the negative stories at TMZ, the gossipy type stuff or, all the sad type stuff. But, when I was there, they were like, just find stories that you find interesting, and I was like, okay. So I started working on wrestling stories. It was like, I knew that there was a big audience for wrestling and they didn't understand it. They were like, no, that's not us. We don't care about that. And then I'd kind of like sneak one or two through, like here's one, like here's a second one. And they would see the traffic and it'd get better traffic than all the other stories, like it'd be at the top of the page and they were like, hey, why don't you get a few more of those wrestling stories, Yeah. And so, I started doing that more and more and becoming more established. Now I was also doing regular, news as well. I also, as sad as it is, like I broke some of the biggest stories in TMZ's existence, when I was running the website, or even beyond, like as much as it sucks, had to work on a lot of like death related stories. And, as crappy as it is to have to do something like that, my brother died when I was working at TMZ. And
the one we were talking about earlier?
Yes. Oh, and wow. Yeah, he died when I was I think like 7 years ago now or something like that. And he, just from living it, and how shitty something like that can be, it helped me. I guess I don't say helped me, but it taught me how to have more empathy for sad situations, and honestly, like, you think of like, oh, these scumbags, calling a family when their family member just died and stuff. But like most of the people I ever worked with at TMZ, they were always very thankful of me for reaching out because it was like, I've always prided myself on trying to make sure factual information is being given to the public. I know how much false information can hurt someone. And so, I always just wanted to help them because that, it's usually people with a famous following and negative, false information can get spread so easily on social media, even then, that I really just focused on trying to make sure I helped people. Like I really did, like for every negative story I saw, I would just try and figure out who I could help in that situation. And so it was always just doing stories like that, like so where I could, get stories that could help people or stories that people found interesting, like, stuff that was related to Keenan and Kel, or like, stuff that was just like, stuff that was so random that nobody else was working on. And my bosses always just appreciated it. And so I moved up just because I was always hustling. It's something I've always done. I can't help it. Even now, my people at work are like, hey, you can take a break some days. And I'm like, no, I got to keep hustling. So I've always just been hustling. And, Harvey Levin always just kind of respected my hustle. And so I kept getting promoted until eventually I was running the website on weekends. And yeah, I mean, like sometimes I broke crazy. I would go above and beyond though. Like, I would go to in the field when something happened and be like in the field trying to get information and be an actual reporter and like go up and ask people questions. And, not everyone is willing to do that. And so that was really how I moved up and kept moving up at TMZ, was just hustling and having my finger on the pulse of what was going on.
So how did you get into it with Fox after the TMZ thing? Was it something connection that you had, or is it people? Maybe somebody saw you and was like, you know what, we want that guy.
When I left TMZ, I then I started my website. I started Pro Wrestling Sheet, and I was doing Pro Wrestling Sheet for about a year, I'd say. And sometimes I'm like overconfident in what I'm doing sometimes. And, I had an agent at that point who had reached out to me from a agency out here for, people that represent people like managers and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And so he was my agent for a brief period of time. And I was pitching a TV show that I was trying to get on TV, and he got me in touch with an executive at Fox just to like have lunch and see if like I could pitch anything to them. And so I met up with this executive at Fox and tried to get them to buy my website. It was like, hey, I think you should bring this on to Fox, and it should be your wrestling vertical, Wrestling Sheet at Fox. And, the pitch didn't work. I was way ahead of myself. The website had only been around a year, but I was, I was being cocky.
You're trying.
I was trying, like I said, I'm always hustling. I'm always grinding, and so, but he respected the hustle. Like, hustle always respects hustle similarly, and so he respected the hustle and was like, look, we're not looking for that right now, but just always stay in touch with me. And so when Backstage came along, when WWE Backstage came along, I was still doing Pro Wrestling Sheet, and I heard rumblings of it, and it's in my hometown. And like I said, sometimes I'm overconfident, and I reached out and was like, hey, if you guys end up doing a TV show, I'd love to get a look for if you're going to be doing any news type stuff, And sure enough, they were looking for that, and they reached out to me, and, I had a couple auditions, which were very intimidating because it's like I walk into this room and it's all of these legends and then me, So
you had the audition in front of the wrestlers, like in front of the wrestlers?
Oh yeah. Renee was there. Christian was there. Booker T was there, and other people. Rey Mysterio was like a guest because he was just helping. And I think he was doing panel stuff too. But yeah, and a few other people too. And so, and it was like that first one, it was like all these legends and then me. And I was like, what am I doing here? Like in my mind, like what the heck, but it worked out and I got on the show. And once I started doing Backstage, like I'm all about moving up. I don't want to like feel like I'm going backwards.
Yeah.
And so, once I started doing Backstage, it was like I really wanted to move to Fox. And so I started just kind of like trying to make that happen, and eventually I talked to enough people, and, the pandemic slowed things down, but, eventually I was able to make it all happen. And I'm so happy I did, because I have never been more fulfilled at work than I am right now. Like I seriously, like, I don't even think I realized that my dream was interviewing wrestlers every week like I do until I started doing it. And it was like, man, like as much as I loved doing Pro Wrestling Sheet, as much as I loved having a podcast where I talked to my friends every week and we would just, BS about wrestling and joke around and talk about, have fun with it. Like getting just to like talk to the talent and pick their brains each week is like the coolest thing. Like I'm talking to Samoa Joe about his release and return. I'm talking to Edge about his whole career. I'm talking to Seth Rollins about being in the Shield. Like I'm talking to Dolph Ziggler about when he cashed in his Money in the Bank. Like these are all such cool things. Like I'm talking to Miz about wrestling at WrestleMania against John Cena with The Rock, his idol there, and it's like, what a life I'm living right now. Like this is crazy, and I know that I'm living a dream right now. Like, and the pressure gets to me every week. Like it really does. Like I'm not just skating by on all these things. And I'm putting a lot of research into these interviews. Like I'm really trying, because like I don't take for granted this opportunity for 1 second. Like, I know that there's a million people right behind that door that would kill to be able to do what I'm doing. So I'm just really trying to make sure I'm giving people the most interesting interviews I can. You know, I'm trying to cover their careers. I'm trying to get like in their mind a little bit more on how they develop their character over the years. And then I'm also trying to find like some fun things to talk to them about, like talking to Finn Balor about whether aliens exist, or, you know, talking to, you know, just like, I like these fun topics, talking to Dolph Ziggler about not fun topics, but just different topics that are like,
not wrestling related, yeah.
Not wrestling related, like talking to Dolph Ziggler about Free Britney and stuff like that. Like just this, all this stuff that like I find interesting, and I think that other people do too. And I'm really trying to just bring people interesting 45-minute conversations, because I know that like we don't really have a lot of places where you can get 45-minute conversations with a WWE star every week, unfiltered, where they can talk about whatever. So I know that like I have like a blessing here, and I'm really trying to do good with it. So I hope people are enjoying the show that I'm doing.
No, you're doing a really good job, man. I sent you that when I listened to the Samoa Joe interview, I messaged you right away on TikTok. It was one of the best interviews I thought you did so far, man. And you only, like I said, have 14 episodes so far. So yeah, that was one of the best ones I thought, man. And you know, the one thing that I found unique about what you said is that a lot of people always talk about what it takes to get there, but you bet on yourself, you know, many times about, you know, just making moves happen. You know, like some people, you know, some people might be intimidated or afraid to make those type of moves, but I think like you said, bro, you have to take those chances. I'm saying if you don't get it, well, at least you know you tried. You know what I mean? Because you know what? You try to get to this on your website. I'm saying it didn't work out, but like you would have been more upset with the thought of like, what if I didn't go? Like it's always that what if, you know what I mean? Like what if maybe they would have bought it? You would have never known. But like at least you know, okay, I went there, and that helped you get other connections too, man. So if you have,
well, it's also crazy to set goals too. Like honestly, bro, like I think setting goals is so important. I legitimately, before I started the website, I met with this guy and I read his bio, and his bio said he left this big company. He went and started his own website. He sold the website to a bigger company, and then he moved to another bigger company and had this great career. And I was like, man, that's a great career path. That sounds cool. That's what I want to do. So then I started a website. Like I went and started the site, and then I grew it to where it needed to be. I sold the website to a bigger entity, and then I moved on to an even bigger one than that. And I feel like, you know, I agree. I think betting on yourself is super important. It's something that you have to do. And I think that like that's why I was telling you before we got on here that like you got to keep pushing with this podcast, and you got to keep doing, you know, your stuff, because I think that like, you know, you've got a solid fan base that I think really enjoys your authenticity. And I think that you should just keep pushing for it, because I think that you have a good voice for this kind of a thing and a great knowledge for this kind of stuff. And so, yeah, man, you got to bet on yourself. That's what you got to do if you want to succeed.
Yeah, I think it's important to set goals too, because anything I always come up with, I always put it in my notes on my phone. So like I always put track on my phone so I don't forget it. That way, you know, I can always remember of what it's going to be. But like I always have goals set on my TikTok. So, you know, if I come up with a wrestling video idea, okay, I write that down. But then maybe I can spark it up. Maybe it could be a little bit better. Or, you know, one of the goals I'm trying to reach this year, I'm trying to get to 500,000. I want to reach 500K, and then afterwards I get to a million. You know what I mean? So I always have goals that I'm trying to set for and trying to reach. And I always try to be consistent as I can be with the craft that I do, because if you be inconsistent with everything, you just fall off. People are just gonna, okay, well, he's not being consistent enough. You know what I mean? So like the fans expect to see something out of you. You know what I mean? So you do interviews every week. So maybe people who watch your interviews, okay, you know what? We want to see maybe something different, or switch up, or something of the same things. You know what I'm saying? Like that. That's very important to always set goals for yourself, and to always have different ideas of things that you want to do. You know what I mean? Because betting on yourself in life, I think, is really important for what you have goals for, because a lot of people in life, I feel like they have dreams and they have ideas they want in their heads, but they're so afraid to push for that thing to become a reality, because some people are like, well, that's never going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, you know, people always tell you when you have dreams, you know, if you want to be a wrestler and you tell people you want to be a wrestler, like, oh, okay, you need to get a real job, or no, that's not realistic enough. Well, why isn't it? Maybe why is that not realistic? Like, people do it. They get paid for it too. So why can't I be that person? You know, so why can't I be CM Punk, or why can't I be Seth Rollins? I want to do what they do. You know what I mean? So it's always
that's why TikTok, dude. That's why TikTok is so good, because I think TikTok, you know, it's allowed people like I think for a long time you go like, man, YouTube is this very difficult world to crack with your videos. And I feel like TikTok lets you act. Like it lets regular person just act if they want. Like you're at home, you want to lip sync to this random movie thing and make something funny that's 30 seconds or whatever. And I think that like it's like seeing the authenticity, like I was saying. And so like I think that it lets people act that might not have ever gotten a chance to act. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden they've got this huge following. And it's like, well, you know what? I wasn't bad at acting. I was just located in a terrible place to try and be an actor. I was located where there's no entertainment industry whatsoever. But now because of this like thing, like I can be connected to everybody. And I think that TikTok has really shown that people can have these big followings that aren't necessarily in the heart of Hollywood, that aren't necessarily someone who would have been considered an influencer on Instagram, but they are influencing people now, and they are entertaining people now. And I think that's why people like TikTok so much. It's like it's the most entertaining platform right now, and it's not actors that are doing it; it's real people that are being real, and I love it.
All right, last question we'll ask you before we get off here, man. Who are some wrestlers that you would like to interview that you haven't had a chance to interview yet? So I'm pretty sure there are a lot of them, but there's got to be some, probably the top list. Like, you know what, I got to talk to this person or this person. So
it's John Cena, definitely John Cena. I grew up watching, I didn't grow up watching John Cena, but like, I was still younger when John Cena was a thing. And like, I watched all of it. John Cena helped get me back into wrestling when I'd fallen out for a minute too. So like, definitely John Cena, because not only that, but I've been prepping for all these interviews I've done. And it's like every single one of them, I've had to watch some kind of John Cena match, I can't say who for Monday, but I had to watch like 3 John Cena matches in a row. And like, I probably watched more John Cena matches than anybody else the past 4 months, because I have been prepping for all these interviews, and he's so prevalent. Rob Van Dam, Edge. I had to interview both those guys. Had to watch tons of John Cena matches to prep for those 2 interviews. And so, like, I'm like, man, John Cena. I have so many questions for John Cena. And he's pretty guarded for the most. I feel like sometimes he's not, like, you don't see like a 45-minute interview with John Cena very often, You'll see interviews he does, but not that long. Like, not in depth. Maybe, because he's doing press junkets. Yeah. He's doing press junkets where you get 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. So he'll do these press junkets, answers 5 questions or whatever. But no one's like, he hasn't done one where someone's like digging in there in a while. So John Cena for sure. The Rock, as much as he was my brother's guy, The Rock for sure. Like I grew up watching The Rock. Yeah, he's The Rock, so many questions I want to ask him. And then also, well, I mean, like Vince McMahon counts as a wrestler, I think, because he's wrestled a bunch. Vince McMahon. Yeah. So Vince McMahon's the number one. Like, I really want to interview Vince McMahon. Like, I wouldn't want to talk to the most unique mind in wrestling history. Yeah. Like, there's so many things you would ask him. Like, how did you even know this was a possibility? I mean, like, so many things that you would love to ask Vince McMahon. I mean, if Vince McMahon would. I wouldn't even know what to ask him if I talked to Vince McMahon. I'd be like, someone said that to me once. They said, what's the first question you would ask him? And I was like, they said, what's the not the first question. They said, what's the number one question you would want to ask him? I was like, God, it would take me at least a day to figure that out. Like, that's like not an easy question. Because I remember I met John Cena once. I met John Cena one time. I booked him to host TMZ when I was there. And it was the coolest guy. And I remember I was in Harvey's office with him, waiting to go out. And he's in his John Cena gear. He's got the shorts on. He's got the shirt on.
Doesn't he?
Well, he was hosting the show, so yeah, he was. I'm almost positive he was in John Cena gear. I'm almost positive he was in John Cena attire. I could be wrong. Almost positive he was in the purple John Cena shirt though. And he said to me, all right, since you're the wrestling guy here, here's your opportunity. You can ask me one question and I'll answer it. And I was like, really? I can ask you anything? And he was like, yeah, anything. And I was like, when are you going to turn heel? Like, why haven't you turned heel yet? When are you gonna turn heel? It was the first thing that came to mind. I don't know, like I was like, why? When are you gonna turn heel? What's the deal? Why would you turn heel? And he goes like, we're standing like face to face, and he goes, well, you never say never, but all I'll say is this much, is that one day I will turn heel, and it's gonna happen when you're least expecting it. And as he finishes that sentence, he went to do like a ball tap at me, when you like slap someone in the balls. So like he goes, when you least expect it, and like goes up for a ball. I was like, whoa, like backed up. And then he laughed and walked away.
That's crazy, man. That's crazy. So that was a couple of years ago. So that's the only time you ever met him? Only time you ever spoke to him or anything?
Oh, yeah. That was like 10 years ago, probably.
Okay. Well, one of the wrestlers I want to see you interview that I would love to see on your channel would be The Undertaker. Yeah, got to make that happen because he does them now. He does the interviews now. So I've been waiting.
I've been waiting for like a good, like I'm thinking, and this is just me spitballing here. I've been thinking in my mind, I kind of want to wait for like maybe like Halloween or something a little more spooky of a time to like interview him, because he also, as much as I love The Undertaker, when he let the gauntlet down, he did like 500 interviews. And as a guy who was working on a website at the time, I had to read every single one of them because I had to see, for the first time, Undertaker was talking about his career. And so he said so much that it's hard to get like new stuff out of The Undertaker now because he finally talked about everything. He like unloaded, like, okay, let's talk about everything. So it's going to be hard to get something interesting out of him. But, oh, yeah, he's in my top 5. Definitely in my top 5 for sure.
Another one that I wanted to see you do is Brock Lesnar. Undertaker and Brock Lesnar, too. Because Brock Lesnar's so intriguing. It's like it's crazy because there are 2 people that have been so unique to me in wrestling to watch. Undertaker, number one, you like legit thought he was like a dead man at one point. Like I legit thought it was like some mysterious, not human being. Like he was human, but like, what is he really? Like he's human, but he's like just something different. And Brock Lesnar just had his aura to him. Like he just seems like such a badass, mean guy. But like I'm sure if you walked up to him in person, he'd be like maybe the coolest guy ever. But like he'd just be so scared to you. Like there's Brock Lesnar, but like should I walk up to him and say what's up, or should I keep my distance? I don't know because he doesn't like people.
I've said like someone. I said once, like, if I got that interview, because I would, he's also in my top 5. I think I didn't include him when listing the people because of the fact that I feel like it's so impossible that he'll ever do the interview with me. But yeah, if I could, I would kill for that one because honestly, if they let me, I would maybe not ask him anything about wrestling. I just want to know about Brock Lesnar, the person. Like, when do you ever see Brock Lesnar talk about what he likes? Like, what music does Brock Lesnar listen to?
Probably country.
Probably, maybe.
You can ask him so many questions, like, why, like, okay, what is it about farming? Like, why do you love farming so much? He loves to farm, like,
exactly.
Yeah, like, so many
what
things.
Is it, what's it like running a farm? Well, like, what do you do for fun? Like, what does Brock Lesnar just do for fun on his own?
Nobody knows either, bro. He doesn't have social media or anything. Like, nobody knows. Like,
and I want to know where he buys all his hats because he's got a very good hat collection. He's actually, outside of wrestling, he's always got some kind of cool hat on.
Does he? I've always seen him pictures with like cowboy hats on, like the
cowboy hat, fedora. He's had a bunch of different ones, dude. Like he's got fancy attire at different times. Like if you search Brock Lesnar hats, there's like 6 different styles of hats he's out there rocking. Guy likes that man appreciates a good hat.
I do want to see the question because I did watch his interview he did with Stone Cold too. You know what I mean? But like, he just seems like such a unique person because he's just so like private and everything. So like, why do you farm? Why do you live in Saskatchewan, Canada? Not everywhere. It's like Saskatchewan is where you want to live. Like, why do you? So many things. Like the only wrestling question I would love to ask him personally is just, even though it was kind of asked, but like I just want to know like the streak, bro. Like,
of course.
Did you honestly feel anything when you broke? Like, did you know how important that was to wrestling, or you just like, okay, I'll do it. Like, fuck it. Like, nobody else is gonna do it. I'll do it. Like, I know it's a business to him, but like, did you understand that moment? Like, you're about to conquer the greatest streak ever created, and you're gonna get so much hate for it. Like, are you That's one thing I always wanted to know. Like, did you know what you were like? What was gonna happen? Like, did you know like the importance of that, or were you just like, sure, like I'll do it, Vince. Like, but nobody else is gonna do it. I'll do it. Like,
I think when I was talking to Samoa Joe, he was talking about how like Brock expects you to come for a fight. Like Brock, Brock wants you to want to kick his teeth in. I want to talk to him about that. I think that like he, just like Joe, like is one of those people that maintains like the kayfabe to a certain degree. Like, Brock Lesnar is probably one of the few people that like, he's like the Undertaker of this generation of like, people think that what you see on TV is Brock Lesnar. And I would love to find out if that's true. My first question in all my interviews is how much of your real true self is there in the character of so-and-so. And I genuinely wonder what his answer would be to that. Because I don't know. I have no idea. I have zero idea.
He may just be like, I don't know. You'll never know.
He might. Genuinely might. I don't know.
You'll never know. I mean, people, like I said, people always want to dislike Brock Lesnar for the wrong reasons, but like anybody would kill to have his job. Who wouldn't want to get paid millions of dollars to people know that wrestlers travel so much. He gets to stay at home. He gets to still be a father, a husband, do what he wants, and he still gets to wrestle, and he still gets paid a lot of money to do it. Like what? I'd do that in a heartbeat. Sign me up, bro.
Like that's literally the dream, is to be able to have a part-time schedule where you get to keep your body in the shape that it can, or the shape that it is, for as long as possible. There's not one wrestler on the roster who would turn down Brock Lesnar's gig, his deal, his schedule, none of his pay, none of it.
Nobody. Anybody would take it in a second, in a split second. You would take it, especially that money.
And he's one of the best wrestlers on the planet. Like, I don't care what anyone says. Look at like, not to like put any wrestlers down, but I mean, like at the same time, like Brock Lesnar's believability is off the charts. Like he's a draw.
His believability. That's why before we get off here, that's why I always said, like him and in the streak, it's like 50-50 with me. Like I'm like, the streak, bro. Like it sucked, but like he's super believable to take the streak. So that's why, like when I thought about it for a period of time, I'm like, bro, like if there was anybody that if you look at any of the wrestlers that Undertaker's wrestled throughout the years of wrestling, maybe the best storyline wasn't there for him and Brock to end the streak. But if you look at all the wrestlers and you look at the believability, maybe the only one I would match it would be like 98 Kane when he first went up against Kane. But the streak wasn't a thing then. It wasn't a real thing then. Legend Killer Randy Orton. Okay, that could have benefited Randy Orton at that time, but the streak was still rising at that time. But Brock Lesnar is literally the most believable person when you look at that streak. We're like, you know what? He could definitely take the streak of the Undertaker when he destroyed.
But he didn't have to. But he didn't have to. They didn't have to end the streak.
He didn't need it for his legacy. I mean, that could have went to somebody like a Bray Wyatt or a Roman Reigns or somebody different. But like,
they shouldn't have ended the streak. I don't think it should have gone to anybody at the end. Like in retrospect, looking back on it now,
I think it should have ended to somebody who would have benefited more from it. Somebody like a Roman or like I wish the Fiend was around.
But even when Roman was gonna do it, when it seemed like Roman was gonna be the one to end it, didn't really feel like he gained anything from it. Like it's not like all of a sudden Roman became the guy who had to be at WrestleMania.
So people were like, oh, whatever, he already lost. But like,
I
think somebody like the Fiend's character, like the Fiend. If I was booking it and the Fiend was around then, I would 100% had him conquer the streak. Like, you're in the streak, you're gonna do it because that would have elevated him so much, bro. Like the Fiend, like he's the next dark mystery, and that could have been somebody like if Undertaker was gonna go out, you go out putting somebody over at WrestleMania, like that would have been.
I just think that like I just feel like it's not a title. The streak, like you don't have you didn't have to end the streak. Like the streak is one of those things that they could have done when Undertaker was 70. Like, like you didn't have to end it. You could have just you didn't have to end it, in my opinion. Like Undertaker 10 years from now could come out and choke slam a guy and pin him at WrestleMania at 70 years old. And everybody, you add one more to that 10 years from now, place would have gone nuts. I don't think you needed, he could have just been that guy. That was the one who did that. And you didn't have to pass that on to someone else. Because in retrospect, now, I don't think that when Brock Lesnar wrestled at WrestleMania, as much as me and you still talk about it, I don't think that it's looked at as the streak got passed on to him, and now if Brock gets beat at WrestleMania, it's like the streak guy being affected. Like, I don't think it has that same allure anymore. I think it's just Brock Lesnar's Brock Lesnar. So I don't know. I feel like
I don't think Brock needed the streak either for his legacy. I just think like his character, believable wise, was the most believable. But like, I don't know. I never had a problem with the streak ending. I would have gave to somebody who would have benefited more from it. That you could have elevated their career. Like if the Fiend ended the streak, that would have solidified him as the new dark face of the dark side, whatever you want to call it. It would have built him up for the future. He would have been established. He ended the streak. He's established now. He just ended the greatest thing in wrestling history. You know what I mean? So I think I understand why people hated it. And some people, I know some people who think it should have been Triple H in the Hell in a Cell match, which I would have hated that. I mean, I would have absolutely been, I would have been more mad about that than Brock Lesnar, to be honest. Like that would have pissed me off. Like the end of that streak.
Oh yeah. Would not have been needed for Triple H to do it at all.
Triple H wouldn't have needed that streak either. But appreciate the time, man. Appreciate everybody been watching in the chat too. I know some people have been leaving some comments. I haven't got to the comment section, but I appreciate you guys for interacting as always. Once again, I'll let you plug in your stuff to everybody where they can follow you and all your social media stuff, man. I appreciate you taking the time for doing this.
Just make sure you follow WWE on Fox, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook. You can follow me at Ryan Satin on all social media as well, at Ryan Satin on TikTok. And make sure you follow just Fox Sports. I mean, we do a lot of great WWE coverage. I mean, I'm writing stories. I'm writing up interviews. I'm doing the weekly podcast. Make sure you check out Out of Character. It's on all podcast platforms. That's the show that we've been talking about, where I do 45-minute interviews with all the top stars in WWE. I've had Rhea Ripley, I've had Natty, I've had Dolph Ziggler, Samoa Joe, Seth Rollins, Edge, all the top stars. That's where you can check them out. There's an archive of them if you just go check them out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Out of Character with Ryan Satin. Make sure you check it out.
Go give him a follow, guys. Make sure you guys subscribe to all my stuff too. Narcolepsy Boy 94, TikTok, Instagram. All the things, man. Appreciate you for taking the time to be on. I got more stuff coming from YouTube channel, more trivias, more drafts. We do on my channel and everything. So make sure you guys be on the lookout. Go give him a follow, and much respect and much appreciated for doing this interview, man. Thank you so much. It means a lot.
Of course.